Hello and thank you for watching Access Asia. Coming up, the World Health Organization has warned that China is underrepresenting the true impact of COVID in the country. This as the world's busiest travel period begins later this month. India's Supreme Court begins hearing cases in favor of same-sex marriage. It could be a watershed moment for the world's second biggest country. And the Taliban's latest edict so controversial, even some of its own members disagree. Bans on women going to universities and working at NGOs. Analysis coming up. In China, there are fears not just of a COVID wave, but maybe a tsunami. Funeral parlors are overwhelmed. Hospitals are packed with elderly patients on respirators. And it comes after the lifting of China's zero COVID restrictions due to protests. The World Health Organization, meanwhile, is pointing the finger, saying China's official virus data is being underreported. Nicholas Rushworth has more.
This hospital reception area in Beijing is packed. There are no beds for those people arriving. Patients with COVID symptoms are being kept in corridors. Chinese officials say the current outbreak is controllable. However, they are being accused once again of systematic underreporting of the number of cases and deaths. China's official statistics throughout the COVID crisis have been incredibly low compared to other countries. For example, while the USA's number of COVID deaths per 1 million population is 3,345, China's is just 4. The WHO says Beijing is not giving the full picture.
We believe that the current numbers being published from China underrepresent the true impact of the disease in terms of hospital admissions, in terms of ICU admissions, and particularly in terms of deaths.
Beijing was having none of that, calling on the WHO and others to be impartial.
As we adjust our COVID-19 response, we will continue to carry out technical exchanges and other communication with the WHO. We hope that it will take a science-based, objective and impartial position to play a positive role in addressing the pandemic globally.
China lifted strict COVID controls last month following protests. In recent days, more than a dozen countries have imposed restrictions on travellers from the country. Beijing, in response, has threatened reciprocal countermeasures. An editorial in the China Daily slammed the West, saying these discriminatory practices strengthen the image some China bashers in Western countries are dying to create, that China is the source of all troubles. One China expert says the Chinese government under Xi Jinping can never be wrong.
If the leader of China, Xi Jinping, says something, it must be true and it must be respected, and any foreigner who says otherwise or criticizes that must be anti-China.
It is estimated there will be 2 billion journeys for this month's Lunar New Year holiday. It's feared that could generate another wave of infections. International health experts are predicting at least 1 million COVID-related deaths in China this year if urgent action isn't taken.
India's Supreme Court began hearing arguments in favor of same-sex marriage filed by couples who say they have been denied their fundamental rights. It's seen as a test for the conservative government of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, which has opposed the measure. 5 years ago, the court decriminalized homosexuality, but members of the LGBT community still complain about discrimination. Our team on the ground has more.
Supriyo and Abhay have been a couple for over 10 years. In 2021, they organized a commitment ceremony in the presence of their family and friends. Their union is considered to be among the first marriages between same-sex couples in the country.
That one fine day, I just realized, why to wait? My people are aware, our families are aware, our friends, colleagues, students, everybody is very, very supportive. Then why to wait? Let's have a celebration. Let's call our own people. Let them know that we are together, or we are happy together.
Even though it's been 4 years since India decriminalized homosexuality, gay marriages are still not legal. The two men have appealed to the Supreme Court to get official recognition of their marriage, which could also pave the way for LGBT couples to be more visible.
Marriage is still very integral to Indian society. If you're not included in the institution of marriage, to some extent you are out of the Indian society. So if the change happens, if we do get married, like we do get the right to marry and we are able to get married legally, will be an automatic acceptance and inclusion that will happen for us in the society. Other than that, I think this step in general opens up conversations, opens up the possibilities of people coming out and loudly proclaiming their sexualities.
Other same-sex couples are also fighting to get the same rights as heterosexual couples. Parth and Uday have been together for 17 years. They have 2 children conceived through surrogacy. But since they can't get married, in the eyes of the law, only Uday is considered the father.
We have children together and I'm not on their paperwork. I'm a non-entity in their lives. Where do I go from here? I fight for that right. Were my partner to pass away, would I have an automatic right over my children? No, I don't. Should my children be hospitalized and my partner be unavailable and they need medical decisions to be taken by the next of kin, am I the designated next of kin? No, I'm not.
If the Supreme Court rules in favor of same-sex marriage in the next few weeks, India would be the second Asian country to extend equality of marriage to all after Taiwan.
The new year began in Afghanistan with yet another set of restrictions for women. In the last 2 weeks of December, the Taliban issued 2 controversial edicts. One banning women from universities, another banning women from working in NGOs. These moves have sparked not just condemnations from the international community, but also mounting opposition inside the country and within Taliban ranks. Lila Jacinto, reporter and senior editor from our internet team, joins us to tell us more. Hello to you. Tell us, first of all, about these divisions.
Well, I mean, right now we're almost 18 months, a year and a half since the Taliban takeover. And what we are starting to see is that the cohesion that this Islamist movement displayed while during the insurgency against the US and the Western-backed Afghan government, now that they're in power, this unity and cohesion is starting to unravel a bit. And what's interesting is that these divisions of opinion are mostly focused on some of the most hardline edicts that the Taliban has passed concerning women. The NGO ban is just the latest, but there have also been a series of edicts effectively denying women and girls access to education. But basically, very broadly, what has happened is that there is a division of opinion between the Taliban officials based in Kabul. Many of them were part of the negotiating team during the US-Taliban talks in Qatar, in Doha. And they are the ones who are, who have some level of engagement with the international community. And then there is the circle of very hardline conservatives. They are all ensconced around the Taliban head. This is the very reclusive Emir, Hibatullah Akhundzada. And they are in the southern Afghan city of Kandahar, the birthplace of the Taliban. So, so people nowadays are talking about the divides between the Kabulis and the Kandaharis, or the Shuras. Now, I spoke to a number of experts and diplomats on and off the record, including former U.S. Special Envoy to Afghanistan, Zalmay Khalilzad. And he tells me that he is still talking to his Taliban contacts. And all of them say one thing. They say that the majority of Taliban leaders are actually opposed to these edicts, these hardline edicts, denying women their human rights. The ones who are passing these edicts and are effectively erasing Afghan women from public life are the Kandaharis, the hardliners, and they are the minority, they say. But it's a very powerful minority. What is unusual is that these divisions and displays are coming out into the public, which is very unusual for the Taliban.
Yeah, fascinating, first of all, for the divisions, but also, as you say, this is public display and tends to be different from what we see in the news or on social media.
Oh, certainly. I mean, you won't see this on Taliban official statements, but what you do see and what was very evident, it actually really came to light in March last year. This is the start of the Persian New Year. So on March 23rd was officially the school reopening after the winter break. And in the lead up to the school reopening, Taliban officials announced that high schools would be open for girls. And the Education Ministry actually invited news teams, to come to the schools. There were diplomats in Kabul, NGO workers in Kabul, and there was a real focus on schools opening for girls. And at the last minute, an edict came from Kandahar, effectively, extending the ban on girls attending high school indefinitely. And so there were news teams at the school gates recording really heartbreaking testimony of, schoolgirls in uniforms just sobbing, so frustrated and desperate. And even more telling was the Taliban officials' responses. So the officials in Kabul, they appeared to be caught off guard. They were just sputtering things about Islamic principles and Afghan culture, and they were really just absorbing the shocks of some pretty hard questioning by journalists. And then months later, the Taliban deputy foreign minister, Stanekzai, a very well-known figure, he actually was on national TV addressing Taliban figures in Kabul, and he called for the lifting of the high school ban. So it really remains to be seen how these divisions are going to play.
Yeah, and we have to remind ourselves that they also said they were going to be more inclusive this time around, the Taliban. What do you think it means for the future then?
Well, on the one hand, the Taliban movement is still, they value unity above all. And the members of the Taliban are sort of religiously committed to obey their emir. The only time this does not apply is if the emir is doing something un-Islamic, right? Now, what is un-Islamic? Really, this is an entire field for experts. There are some experts who are calling on the Taliban, who are opposed to these hardline policies, to come together and stand up to their leader. Zalmay Khalilzad is one of them. But there's also plenty of skepticism about whether this will actually happen. What I personally see happening is that the Taliban hardliners will pretty much keep responding as they have always done as a militant group, cracking down on dissent, firing ministers who are opposed to them, which we have seen over the past year and a half, and, trying to crush the opposition. But the problem here is that the opposition is going to grow. We are seeing mounting protests inside Afghanistan against these policies. The divisions are going to grow within the Taliban ranks, because this is really sinking the country into even deeper poverty and a huge humanitarian crisis in these winter months. So these pressures are starting to build.
All right, Leila, thank you very much. Leila Jacinto from our internet team. And we end on a different note. It's that time of year when is billed as the world's largest ice and snow carnival underway in China. After being scaled back in previous years because of COVID restrictions, hundreds of thousands of tourists are expected to visit the festival in Harbin. The park occupies roughly 810,000 square meters with over 150,000 cubic meters of ice and snow carved into towers and buildings of all kinds. That's it for this edition. Thank you for watching, and please stay tuned to France 24.